Hello, 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 Nesby. I am so excited to be here with you today, and we're so happy that you joined us for Diverse by Design, the business case for diversity. My name is Nia Darville, and I am the Director of Diverse by Design at Perscolis. For those of you not familiar with us, Diverse by Design, powered by Perscolis and ITSMF, promotes solutions-driven conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion within tech. It produces meaningful content that empowers C-suite leaders to make both valuable and socially impactful business decisions, and provides access to sophisticated customized training and talent sourcing solutions to meet companies' talent demands while transforming the diversity landscape of their organizations. Perscolis and ITSMF are both organizations that specialize in the cultivation of talent. Perscolis provides rigorous training, professional development, and employer connections, preparing those traditionally underrepresented in technology for high growth careers. And ITSMF increases the representation of Black professionals at senior levels in technology by developing and nurturing them through enrichment of the mind, body, and soul. Through Diverse by Design, both organizations have teamed up with Nesby to have this incredibly important conversation. According to a McKinsey report, ethnically and culturally diverse companies are 36% more profitable than companies that are more racially monolithic. That's a significant statistic. Research has found that creating and implementing diversity and inclusion strategies just makes good business sense. To lead us in this conversation about the business case for diversity, I'd like to introduce Toacca Rutherford. Toacca is a managing director at JPMorgan Chase Company. She's a product owner in digital self-service. She is responsible for creating an optimal, consistent digital experience that enables millions of Chase customers to complete servicing needs in digital channels across multiple financial products. Prior to this role, Toacca served as the head of business engineering, responsible for product execution, business engagement, and centers of excellence to transform Chase toward a product-aligned organization. In large-scale transformations, Toacca was the chief development officer for consumer, business banking, and auto finance technology to modernize software development for global technology teams. In application delivery, Toacca led development teams as the global head of general ledger technology and chief technology officer for corporate and investment banks finance technology. Toacca began her career at JPMorgan Chase as a database administrator and developer in the firm's trainee program. She was recruited to JPMorgan Chase after graduating from Rutgers University with a bachelor's of science in industrial engineering. Toacca is passionate about giving back in the firm and her community. She believes in creating pathways that can elevate underrepresented groups in STEM fields to address the increasing talent and skills gap. This has been a cornerstone of her firm-wide and community impact. Toacca is a devoted wife and mother of 3 daughters and a Pomsky. Thank you for leading this conversation today, Toacca. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Nia. Wow, what we're off to a great start already. I'm so excited to moderate and lead today's discussion on the business case for diversity. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our distinguished panelists. Our first panelist is Richard Cox. He is a Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for Cox Enterprises. He provides oversight and direction to corporate IT and business leaders on strategy, standards, and opportunities for data analytics and business intelligence, development and support, infrastructure security, and technical services. His career with Cox began in 2013 at Cox Automotive, a subsidiary of Cox Enterprises. There, he held several leadership positions, including Vice President of Client Performance and Vice President of Business Operations and Customer Care. He was instrumental in supporting operational transformation and the analytics function across AutoTrader and Kelley Blue Book. In 2018, Richard was Chief Operations Officer for the City of Atlanta as an executive on loan. As COO, Richard provided oversight and executive management for the city's operating departments, including aviation, fire, police, parks and recreation, and public works, as well as internal operations, including information technology. Prior to joining Cox Automotive, Richard was CEO and president of Jones International University, as well as Vice President of Customer Experience at Orbitz Worldwide. In this role, he led a team of more than 2,000 employees while transforming the online and offline customer experiences. Richard earned a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Liberty University and a Master of Business Administration with a concentration of Management Information Systems from Kennesaw State University. Thank you for joining us today, Richard.
Great to be here.
Awesome. Our next panelist is Marcus Daly. Marcus is Chief Technology Officer for S&P Global Ratings and is responsible for leading the ratings technology team in developing essential product solutions, transforming the technology supporting the ratings division, and driving cultural change. Previously, Marcus was Chief Technology Officer for InContact, where he revitalized the technology organization and led an initiative to deliver a single cloud-native platform that was used by all products. Prior to that, he was CTO for S&P Global Market Intelligence, where he implemented a global strategy that leveraged big data, machine learning, and industry tools to deliver world-class solutions and quality to customers. With over 25 years of technology industry building and supporting a range of products across industry categories, Marcus is a seasoned executive with a passion for developing leaders and technology transformations. Thank you for joining us today, Marcus.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Hans Brown, our next panelist, is the Head of Enterprise Innovation and Chief Information Officer for Corporate Technology at BNY Mellon. In his role as Head of Enterprise Innovation, Hans is responsible for global innovation centers focused on rapid experimentation on new ideas and developing products and services in collaboration with clients, fintechs, big tech companies, and internal teams. He is also responsible for BNY Mellon's partnership strategy, creating partnerships and principal investments with startups and external stakeholders to deliver new capabilities, products, content that enables the company and its clients to be successful. As Chief Information Officer for Corporate Technology, Hans is responsible for the delivery and transformation of the technology supporting human resources, finance, risk, compliance, regulatory, legal, and corporate treasury within BNY Mellon. Wow. Hans has a Master of Science in International Technology Management from the University of Warwick in the UK, as well as a Master of Engineering in Civil and Structural Engineering from the University of Liverpool. He has been a keynote speaker at multiple corporate and industry events on technology evolution and trends, as well as the rise of fintechs and APIs in financial markets. He was a key contributor to the MAS Financial World, Finance as a Service API Playbook. Ooh, a lot of acronyms there. Published by the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Thank you for joining us today, Hans.
Thank you very much for having me.
And our final panelist, Hank Spraggins, has a degree in computer science from Drexel University. Recently, he relocated to the Bay Area where he works as Senior Director, Technology Strategy and Operations for Dropbox, the fastest software as a service company to reach 1 billion in revenue. His responsibilities include strategic IT platforms, IT risk, cybersecurity and governance, SWE Director for Employee Applications and Vendor Management. Hank also leads the Black Dropboxer Mentoring Program as part of Dropbox Employee Resource Group. Professionally, he has had several roles as a leader, roll up your sleeves technologist, SaaS at scale, cloud strategist, and program management executive across various industries. He has led transformations and managed teams more than 100 employees strong and is responsible for critical programs and services. He is an engineer at heart. He's married to a wonderful school principal and teacher, and together they have 3 business-minded daughters and 1 technically minded entrepreneurial son. Thank you for joining us today, Hank.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
So let's begin. In an interview with Forbes, Damian Howard, one of Diverse by Design's co-founders, stated this regarding incorporating diversity and inclusion practices into businesses. You should not be doing this out of philanthropy or out of the goodness of your heart. As a business, you should be doing it simply because it makes good business sense. So now my question to our panelists: how does having a diverse and inclusive workplace make good business sense?
Maybe I'll kind of take it back. I've had the privilege within BNY Mellon of working across Asia, Europe, North America, and Latin America. So it's a 4-continent club, as I like to affectionately call it. And one of the things that has kind of come loud and really true is, it's one thing to see the statistics that you mentioned on the McKinsey report that basically talks about how ethnically diverse companies do way better than non, but it's actually a totally different thing to see it. So all of the teams that I've had, or I've led, or I've been part of that have been diverse have absolutely wiped the floor with the non-diverse teams, time and time again, to a point where it's actually not statistically possible for it to be a fluke. It's just the ability to kind of bring in a speed of thought, a speed of perspective, a difference in an ability to see and examine a problem from different facets, and to be able to execute on that at scale, time and time again across every industry. Doesn't, it beats hands down. One of the examples I'd like to quote I'm an engineer, and I share a lot with Hang. And my background is not computer engineering. I wasn't a computer scientist by trade. I liked earthquakes, I like building buildings and the complex challenges of throwing up buildings and bridges in remote and hospitable places. But once an engineer, always an engineer. And bringing that diverse viewpoint from how to build physical things into research and development with a company like Canon, into building software, the transferability and the perspective that you bring by just even that facet of diversity improves the team. And you see things that they wouldn't see. I make the joke. In software, people think, you know what, you get it wrong, you roll out a patch. If you're building a building, you get it wrong, you knock things down. People get very upset. You swing large hammers and people look and point at you. Bad things happen. So your tolerance level is different. Bringing that into software brings a different speed of thought. So not only do I think it's true, it's just I've seen it work time and time again. And if you want to be a successful business, you have to include this as part of your plan.
I couldn't agree more with Hans. I think in my personal experience, I've seen the same thing. And as a foundation, I look at sports teams, and regardless of the sport, if you had one of the same type of player in American football, if you had a team of all quarterbacks, I would submit that a well-rounded team would win every day of the week. And same in organizations. Essentially, we're teams, and the teams are made up of skills that are often the experiences, the backgrounds, and the perspectives of the individuals. And I think it's only logical to surmise that if you have all of one type of individual, you're probably going to have less optimized decision-making and perspectives versus having a diverse team. And it was alluded to earlier, the McKinsey report. In that same report, I think they said in companies in the top quartile in terms of gender diversity were 15% more profitable in terms of female leaders as part of the organization. There's a Harvard Business Review report that essentially says in venture capital firms, diverse companies outperform those that are not diverse. So I think the facts are really clear. And the last thing I'll say is, when you look at, particularly in the US, if you look at where our population is projected to be in the next 20 years, whether you look at Brookings or the Pew Institute, we're going to be a more diverse country. And I think the companies that have employees that are made up of those same types of individuals are probably going to be able to engage them more and provide the right services to meet the needs.
Richard, do you mind if I build on that just a little bit? It's really good points. One of the things that we've been challenged with on the within S&P Global has been that, look, we've been in business for 100+ years, and we've got applications sometimes that feel like they're that old. And trying to find our way out of that implies a lot of need for innovation. And one of the beautiful things about having diversity is that you get people coming in with different ideas, and the solutions that they come up with are not the traditional ideas. You get everybody of the same kind in a room, you're going to end up with the same kind of solution. And we've really needed some really difficult and challenging solutioning to occur for us to be able to migrate out of where we've been. And as a result, we've seen some amazing results. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, being highly regulated, and I think some of the other panelists can agree with this, one of the wonderful things also about having diversity in the room is you have a tendency to hold each other accountable. And it's not because of anything other than people are willing to speak up. People feel free because the inclusion is a part of that. And so when they see things, they're going to ask questions. They're going to catch things that other people may not catch. And to be honest with you, that kind of environment creates an environment of higher morale and greater trust. And you need that today when you're going to be growing a business that has a lot of legacy, but has an incredible amount of future opportunity. So, I mean, this to me is just kind of like the center of how you build a great company.
I would definitely concur with what everyone said. It's the epitome of high performing teams to have diversity. I think the other piece to tie on what Marcus was saying is that we know from human nature that when you don't or cannot assume what the other person's thinking because they're different than you bring your A game to the table, right? You think through a design better, you think through your approach better, you think through your strategy better. And finally, for those who are individuals, as an encouragement, if you're interviewing and the interview's not going well, I can recommend you might want to stop the interview and say, hey, it feels like I'm different. Is that valuable to you all? And at least you have that as a momentum stopper and a way to, reorganize the conversation accordingly back to diversity. So I definitely recommend that also.
That's awesome. And in systems thinking, to my fellow engineers here and computer scientists, we talk about, today's problems come from yesterday's solutions, right? It's not like something that was just invented out of the air. And so that continued innovation requires diversity, especially given our customer landscape, given the businesses we serve worldwide, especially being based in the US. So what do you find then are some of the barriers in the workplace that prevent organizations from becoming more diverse?
I think the big thing is, when you think about, reward systems, when you think about the pipeline, I think it comes down to retention for the most part. We do companies, you take any of the big tech companies or any of the mid tech, we do a great job at hiring. We don't do a great job at retaining. And we don't do a good job at, showing that there is opportunity to move around and to do different things. And so what happens is we get this revolving door, right? We hire, they leave, we hire, they leave. And we don't really address the systemic issues within the company that don't allow for people to feel safe and inclusive. And then we lose that innovation because it walks out the door and goes to another company. So I definitely think that retention devices, specifically as one example, you have your ERG groups, what we call employee resource groups, to kind of foster that type of work. But I also think sponsorship and mentoring is critical. And I know I'm maybe tooting my own mentoring horn, but there's nothing like, and I think Harvard did this as a report, that when you can take someone who feels different and introduce them to someone in power and organization as a mentoring or as a sponsored technique, their performance goes off the charts, their loyalty to the company goes off the charts, and you start to actually retain people at no additional cost other than mentoring. So those are the things I think to kind of maintain innovation.
So I may kind of chime in here because, and again, I'd like to be a little bit contrarian because I subscribe to theory. There's no bad them and good us. And one of my leaders kind of basically made it very clear. The barriers are a little bit of us. And, I kind of look at this panel and, this really amazing panel, and we're all senior leaders in our companies. It's on us. So I kind of think there's a little bit of where we have, by virtue of the fact that, all of the things, all of the structures that basically enabled us to be successful in our careers, making that conscious, deliberate effort when we're designing diversity into our structures or when we're basically implementing whatever policies that we've got, you're taking that little extra bit that basically says, I'm making a deliberate, conscious choice to do something. I'm an engineer. Things don't happen by accident. They happen because you design it, you stick with it, you basically instrument it, you do the work, and you get a feedback loop that validates your thinking in the first place. There's no, and one of my leaders kind of said it, there's no mythical they. You made the joke, there's no they at bnymellon.com, but you can email and say, they made this happen. It's you. So you know what? So that's kind of one piece. So I kind of like that real, there is an element of us. The second piece is, I think a lot of the time the challenge is we focus on the diversity and we forget about the inclusion. So, and I kind of hang to the comment that you basically made, that revolving door, I think happens because we get the diversity in and we don't include it. I mean, how many times do you go to a meeting and somebody doesn't speak up? And as a senior leader, we don't get up to say, you know what, you might have that idea, you might have that perspective, and more importantly, you don't know enough, so you don't know what's impossible. So you're not constrained by the act of what we have always known as this is the way, this is what's possible. You're looking at this differently. You don't know this is impossible, so you just kind of do it. It's no different from human beings shouldn't fly. Apparently, two brothers decided, hey, I don't know this is impossible. I'm going to do it. So it's just that. I think it's both things. And the one thing that I kind of really kind of go back to, and I forget if it was a McKinsey or BCG report, and it really rammed it home to me. And it basically looked at 45% of all ethnic minorities, or LGBT candidates, or women that go in for a role, 9 out of 10 will leave or will turn down the role at offer because of a perceived lack of an inclusive culture, either during the interview process or during their first year. So I think both are important, but we can't just kind of, the diversity piece is good, but every voice needs to be heard, and it's on us, both as individuals and as employees, to make sure that our voices are heard within each company.
Ultimately, all of us here are executives and have the responsibility to get involved. You have to be openly involved too, by the way. And I wanted to probably just add one little small piece to what Hans is saying, and that is, for me, I felt like the thing that we needed to focus on was improving our pipelines. One of the things I saw over and over again was that we were working hard, but our pipelines weren't changing. We were doing a lot to include inclusion, but our pipelines weren't changing. And I felt like by adding additional, first of all, listening to the employees and saying, how can I support you as an executive to bring in additional pipelines that are going to allow us to be able to get more diverse candidates in? And then me personally getting actively involved with bringing those to the fore and making sure that they got implemented. One of the nice things about working at SP Global, and I'm sure for the rest of my panelists, is we've been given the latitude to be able to make those choices and to be able to innovate and to try to find creative ways to be able to make that happen. It takes energy, right? It takes a lot. Sometimes it even takes money. Sometimes you got to put up some money to be able to open that pipeline. But by getting directly involved, it's allowed us to be able to now start to really move the needle, as opposed to just talking about it. We've actually been able to now truly move that needle. But I do think it's required an executive or more to get involved, and then two, getting the employees that work for us involved and having them come to us with the pipelines and then supporting them, the activities that they want to do, the other things that they want to get involved with, saying yes, and then being willing to pay for it. So it does start with the executive, and then I think it ends with employees who are engaged and empowering them to be able to bring it forward.
Yeah, I mean, we are the ones we've been waiting for, right? And it's a great plug for diverse by design, what you described, because there's inclusion by intention as well. And so how do you now bridge those two, create an empowered organization that feels psychologically safe to be their best selves, right? When they show up, to be authentic, to feel comfortable asking for things like mentorship, as Hank described as an example, because that also takes courage. And so as executives, you all definitely play a pivotal role in creating those cultures and leading by example. So thank you for that. And, so I would love to pull the thread on some of the unique decisions your organizations, whether it's you yourself or in the firm, have made to make a real emphasis on how to change the landscape in your company and your organization, and how that business strategy has helped, improve and made an impact.
Maybe I'll start, if I can start again.
Yeah.
The first thing I look at is I look at the board, of any organization, I look at my executive committee, and they look like me. The people on my EC that look like me, lots of them. And I look at my leadership teams across both our CIO, our global CIO, Bridget Engel, and there are other people that look like me. There are the people who have my background, and the same in Roman Regelman, who's my other boss. Again, at his executive table, there are people who are like me, there are people who think like me, there are people from my background, and so on. So I kind of think there's an element of no company, and I kind of think no right-sounding company doesn't have policies or programs created to improve diversity and inclusion. No right company does. Every one of them has a program. So for me, the real piece that I look at is how do you implement and act on that in a way I can see, in a way that actually, you know what, it's not just the yak, yak, yak and the funky press statements and it's real and I can see it. So I look at the board of the bank I work for. It's 236 years old, and the board is diverse, both in terms of gender, racial makeup. I look at the executive committee. It's diverse, both in terms of gender and race. I look at both of it, and it's real. So my psychological safety is, you know what, from the top downwards, it's happening. And any excuse I have disappears, because all I got to do is look and say, look what's happening here. I have a choice to do it. So I kind of think the programs exist. This framework, the structures exist. We just need to do it and make it stick. And it's on us. Each one of us here, we need to do it and make it stick.
Agreed. Anyone else want to chime in on what your organization is doing, your company, or just what you feel personally passionate about that you've done maybe locally in your community or organization that you feel has made an impact and is better served as a result?
I'll talk about a couple of initiatives at Cox Enterprises. We have partnerships with organizations like ITSMF. We have partnerships with organizations that you maybe wouldn't think about. So as an example, the SEC athletic department. So for those of you who are big football fans, the Southeastern Conference, but we partner with their student athletes of all types of different sports, and they come to Cox Enterprises so they get a preview in terms of the diverse companies that we have, and many of them are offered internships. So that serves as a pipeline. And then within my technical organization, I'll tell you, of our entire department, 30% of the individuals are female. In my mind, that's not good enough. And so what we have done this year, I, along with all of my direct reports, we have identified one hypo female that we will mentor over the next 12 months. Now, here's the key. The key is if you want to have more diversity, have more diverse leaders. So when we have leadership roles that come open, and those females, if we get them in those roles, we'll hire more females. That's how it works. And I think really, and Hans mentioned this earlier, the key is being intentional. And I think every organization that wants to move the needle, they have to be incredibly intentional.
And this is probably a little bit of a philosophical, if not a debate thing. And I think that companies need to have targets at senior levels, right? We have targets at levels below senior level in many corporations and companies, but I haven't really seen many targets. I'll share a story because the story is sometimes better than a point. I was talking to a CEO who was selling us software products, and he mentioned to me this Black organization. Now, he does not identify as Black, so I tried to figure out, why are you mentioning to me an organization that identifies as Black? Are you trying to make a connection here? Or are you trying to sell more software? I couldn't tell. So I took him aside and asked him what he was doing with the organization. And he said, not much. And I said, neither am I. And then I said, well, what are you doing in your company at a global level to hire more URMs, underrepresented minorities? And he said that I don't have a target. And I said, well, if you don't have a target, how you gonna know if you're actually succeeding? And he said, it's a good point. And I said, yeah, you need to have a target. Let me give you one, 25%. And he looked at me like, oh, and I said, yeah, this is why this target is good. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have your other direct reports say things like, oh, I don't want to lower the bar. Oh, I don't know if we can do that. Oh, I'm not sure we can actually find that many people. And that will tell you all of the blockers you have to deal with. And even if you don't meet your 25%, you get close thereof, you now are aware of the cultural norms in your organization. And so he thanked me for that. And I think those are the things that we need to continue to do to challenge each other. Everyone has a target for growth, revenue, EPS. Why not have a target, for senior level hires?
Yeah, that's such a great point. And companies over the years have, gone that route, retracted, right? We've seen those stories come and go, but, we measure what matters in any business. And so the fact that we're not thinking about the business case for diversity lies in the ability to measure and to describe the intentionality with those measurements. And so that's just all great advice. And one great thing about Diverse by Design is that we encourage conversations like this to be able to share ideas, because my hope is that from this conversation, each of you take away something that you could potentially implement or influence or build upon, because you have a diverse group here that can build on those ideas. And so I just think this is great. One more question before we move into Q&A.
Do you mind if I just share?
Marcus.
Yeah, just because I wanted to
sure.
share a couple of really concrete ideas. Just real quick, because I think some really awesome thoughts were just shared, but I thought some concrete ones that might be useful. I just have to put a plug in for Prescolis, right? I think getting involved with Prescolis is a wonderful way to be able to get some great talent in-house. Activate IT if you're out on the West Coast in Denver. My home's actually out here in Utah, so Activate IT is something that we take a look at for our Denver-based employees. We've posted an evergreen job description out there that allows people to continue to apply. And the way we've worded it, we put a lot of hashtags around it with our social LinkedIn posts to try to draw in certain types of folks who we can then say, okay, this is somebody that even though we may not have an open rec, we're going to still plug them in and find a place for them. That kind of evergreen approach has been very useful. Some incredible candidates that I was actually a part of the interview process for. We brought in this large group of candidates from the National Black MBA Association, ran them through this interview loop. And throughout my career, this is one of the most engaging set of interviews I've experienced. Incredible talent. And it wasn't one of our pipelines that we had before. So I would definitely stress that's a great place to recruit some fantastic talent. Another thing to do is to be able to pick out where are those high potential leaders that fit into some of the places where you want to have some more diversity growth. Go ahead and spend the money necessary to give them professional coaching, right? I think the professional coaching for a lot of people is something that they've never received, and when they receive it, they turn into somebody completely different. It's just a matter of being able to be given that opportunity for education. And then lastly, I wanted to mention performance reviews. We just recently went through an annual performance review cycle. I'm sure many of you probably have. It's an opportunity to not just go through and do the numbers, but it's an opportunity to start to slice and dice your employee population and then start to break them out and see, do we have something outside of standard deviation? Is there something that's missing? And then very deliberately, even if you have to do it out of budget, make corrections to be able to get people where they need to be, either from a leveling standpoint, from a equity standpoint, from a salary standpoint. But I'll be honest with you, having gone through that process multiple times, you don't have a whole lot of any sort of issues like that. But when we first got started with doing it, we found some real pockets where we're like, wow, I mean, what a missed opportunity, right? That you got to move and correct that. But when you do something like that, you have to make sure you do it with an inclusive eye, meaning that you're going to have to cover all of your employees, right? Everybody should be treated equally. And so no matter whether or not it's a man or a woman or some other type of ethnicity, you want to make sure that you go across the board. So that way, when somebody comes to you and challenges you with how you're approaching it, you say, hey, we did this across the board equally for everybody. And that allows you to be able to still target some of the groups you're looking for, but to do so on having the higher ground, right?
Oh, that's great. And I actually took notes myself on some of your ideas to take away, because from all of you, because again, it takes a village to make this kind of impact, and it takes a global village. And given the types of companies we are a part of and what diversity means in a global sense as well as in a local sense. So I think it's really important. We're going to get ready for our Q&A. So for all participants, please feel free to put your question in the chat. And while we wait for that to come through, this is very timely in, what is going on right now. Given the heightened awareness, particularly last year, of the social injustice and racial inequality we saw come to a head, and actually we saw the uprising globally with the George Floyd murder and all sorts of, we could probably spend the next few hours just talking about all of what transpired and came to just a head last year. And many companies in response, if there was an urgency of now moment or series of moments in the middle of the pandemic, certainly last year was it for us here in the States. And so many companies committed in response to that to become more diverse, to create environments that promote diversity, redouble efforts, or really lean in pretty hard on what they were going to do economically, socially, politically, etc. So, who was it earlier that said all talk and no action, or something like, it's great to talk, but I want to see, show me. I'm from Missouri, show me, right, what that means. And how did your organizations respond? Or if you want to share a personal story on, in terms of your impact or how you responded, and what advice would you give to other leaders?
I'll jump in with this one.
Yeah.
I think this one was really personal for me. If many of you remember, there were riots that took place in Atlanta where Cox Enterprises is based, and it was a really, really tough night. The mayor spoke passionately about what Atlanta stands for, and for me personally, having worked for the mayor just about 8 months at the time before, I was really thinking, like, should I be at Cox or should I be helping the mayor? And I landed on doing everything I could within Cox Enterprises, and it started with a really heartfelt video to everyone on my team. And the message was, we have to have each other's back. And we use that as a springboard to create an Action Speak network. And it has really, I love that word, action. We've done a number of things. So we started with listening sessions for our Black and African American employees. Most recently, we've done those same listening sessions for our Asian American and Pacific Island demographic. But we've also helped move legislation to change the hate crime bill in Georgia. We've also committed to funding millions of dollars for organizations that are fighting for justice. But most importantly, and Hank hit on this earlier, for the first time in the history of our company, we have metrics that we are driving to make sure that we have executive representation, and it's tied to money. And to me, that's where the action really takes place.
Richard, do you mind if I ask what metrics you're referring to? That's actually very interesting.
So for senior director and above, and let me kind of break it down, because I think that is kind of the outcome. But to get there, so for the first time, for panel interviews, you have to have a diverse panel that is participating. For every senior director role and above, you have to have diverse candidates. You can't just say no one applied. You have to have that. And then ultimately, we have a target of increasing, and this is over 3 years, and I don't know the specific percentage increase for this year, but if we hit that number, then a certain portion of our personal bonus is tied to that. So we are incented to, frankly, do the right thing. And the last thing I'll say is, look, we've had unconscious bias training for 10, 20 years. And look, there's some benefit there, but at the end of the day, that word intentional, you have to be intentional to move the needle, because we've just not done enough in this area. And this can be a point of emotion, or it can be a point of action. And I submit that it's our responsibility for it to be the latter.
So it's actually quite interesting, because we have within the bank, after the, and the the perspective of everything that happened was very, very personal to me, just in terms of where I've grown up, what I've seen growing. So we hosted a series of courageous conversations that started right at the board. So the board of the bank, this 237-year-old bank, held a courageous conversation right at the board and shared some stories of perspectives that, probably haven't been heard in that boardroom prior, and really opened the eyes. And then we had these conversations happen deep within the organization at every level. I had it with my directs, the leadership team at the EC-1 had the same conversations. Deep down in the organization, we've had all, and a real opening up. And I kind of subscribe to the idea of metrics and, the measurement. Every one of my directs has a metric in terms of how to look at diversity. We have metrics that cover how many candidates, we've basically made the call to say we will insist we have a diverse slate for every single role we have open. And if we don't have a diverse slate, I'm that guy you won't hire. You don't show me a diverse slate, you don't get your rec. You don't get that approval at the end. Show me a diverse slate, show me the diverse panel that interviewed, and then show me the best person you picked out of that list. So again, very intentional. It does affect everybody's bonus in terms of you are personally incentivized, but the structures are in place to help you. We have a very well-defined HR process that's in there to help you. We've deployed AI algorithmic searches that basically remove bias in terms of job descriptions, in terms of candidate slates that apply. So we're actually using the tools to help us do it. And then, you kind of go back to that point. I kind of said, you've got, and I'm not from Missouri, but you've got to show me. Let me see this thing. And let me see that you're basically taking these words and translating them into action. So it's kind of very intentional, but the structures need to be there in place. And there has to be a real investment from the corporate to basically, help change the culture and reward positive behaviors. And as senior leaders, you've got to translate that into something that's accountable. I won't sign off an offer unless I can prove, you can show me that you've had a diverse slate, you've had a diverse interview panel. You just won't get that signed off. And, if you want to do the right thing, you've got to be deliberate about it.
That's great. And actually, that answered one of the questions that was in the Q&A, both Richard and Hans' response. When hiring for a new role, how do you ensure unconscious bias does not play a role in the decision, and what are tips to being intentional? And you definitely shared those. I have one more question from the Q&A that I'd like to close with, so I'll limit it to just one respondent. But this is a reflective question, which is, if you look back on your career, can you share an opportunity where you or a leader, that you were under, right, reporting to, missed an opportunity to address inclusivity and equity within your company? And, obviously that's something that we want to make sure you're comfortable sharing. But whoever wants to take this one to close us out, I think that will be great.
I guess I'll take it.
All right, Hank, thank you.
Yeah, so I won't talk specifically about, this is not about Dropbox. This is about my experience in other companies. And I think the one area that we missed out on, that I can speak about, missed out on mostly, is Black women. There just aren't enough Black women who we know are qualified doing STEM work. I think that we've made excuses. I think that we've made it difficult for them to be authentic. We either say they're too opinionated or too docile. We pick whatever one works. And I think my big failure is I haven't actively sought out enough Black women to actually be on my team and to be on other teams. And then finally with that, I also have noticed that a number of Black women are not from the States. They may be from the Caribbean or from other areas. And we had a time where we required sponsorship. So we were turning down 4.2 GPA college graduates, right? Great people, knew how to do the work, only because we wouldn't sponsor. And now, of course, we sponsor just about everyone. So, that's another miss too. But I firmly believe that Black women are a credible part of our future in tech, and an incredible part of process orientation, strategy design, and all the elements that make for good work. So I think that's the one area that I'm gonna look back on. And when I saw the question, I thought, what am I gonna do different this year in terms of hiring to kind of make sure we actually see more Black women come through, and then hopefully, of course, hire them. So, yeah.
Well, as a Black woman here representing, I can plus one you on that, and that's for another whole conversation. Hans, Richard, Marcus, Hank, thank you so much for an insightful conversation, for your willingness to share ideas, your strategies. And I just really, really am grateful to have had the opportunity to meet all of you today and to be able to share in this conversation. So over to you, Nia.
Thank you so much, Toacca. I don't know about you all, but I am full. I'm so full, and I'm so ready to go out and actually use these actionable strategies that the panelist has provided today. Thank you, Toacca, for moderating. Thank you to each of our panelists for sharing your time and expertise with us. And I'm sure that everyone who listened today is walking away with fresh insight and tools to implement change within their realms of influence. As you've heard today, investing in diversity and inclusion isn't just a philanthropic principle. It simply makes good business sense. Significant research shows that a diverse and inclusive workplace tends to provide better staff engagement, higher productivity, and less turnover, as well as increased innovation and profitability. At Diverse by Design, we want to empower organizations to move from conversation to action, and we want to meet with you to help your organization figure out how to do just that. We want to invite you to schedule a consultation with us and learn how your organization can become diverse by design. Just like they said in the panel earlier, it has to be intentional. That's why our name is Diverse by Design. Visit our website to set that up and learn more at diversebydesign.org. Before we go, I want to thank our sponsors, Google, Tech Systems, JPMorgan Chase, Comcast, and Chubb for their support. And most importantly, I want to say thank you for joining us.